Hello, my name's Andrew Brooks. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Now, we're going to be looking at another Beatles single that's really, really hard to come by these days. And in fact, unless you bought it back in 2003, you're never ever going to get it as a 7-inch single anyway. January 69 was the time the Beatles started recording what was to be, in the end, the Let It Be album plus the Let It Be film. And obviously, they recorded these, as we now know, in Twickenham Film Studios and at their own home studios, Apple in Savile Row. There was hundreds of hours of recording of film, audio, as well as obviously recording for the album. So there's all those outtakes as well. And the only way we could actually get to hear them was by buying bootlegs, such as this sort of lovely bumper box set we've got here, the Get Back journals. There's 11 albums in here, and there's plenty more bootlegs that came out in the 70s, the 80s, even into the 90s. And people, I think, are still buying bootlegs now. They like to have something tangible. But of course, all this material is available for you for free on YouTube, unlike we had to shell out hard-earned cash to buy these records back in the day. Then, on the 17th of November 2003, we got this beauty, Let It Be Naked. It came out, and it was meant to be the album that the Beatles actually wanted it to sound like back in the day. Now, George actually gave blessing for this album to come out, and he actually referenced it in an interview for the Beatles anthology in '96. Reading between the lines, though, when they say this is how the Beatles wanted it to sound, obviously 2003, sadly George had passed away by then, and all we had then left was Paul and Ringo. And I have a little sneaky suspicion this probably isn't how the Beatles wanted it to sound. This is probably how McCartney wanted it to sound. We know Paul McCartney didn't actually like the Phil Spector version of Let It Be when it was released, because it put the wall of sound on it, lots of strings, etc. So, and Paul, that was not how he envisaged it. However, it's odd how whenever you see Paul in concert now, there's always strings behind the Long and Winding Road and Let It Be. John, however, had a slightly different slant on it. And I've got a quote from him here. He said, in fact, he, i.e. Phil Spector, was given the shittiest load of badly recording shit with a lousy feeling to it ever. And he actually made something of it. So for me, I kind of get the impression that Lennon didn't actually mind how Let It Be came out. I think he was a bit miffed with Across the Universe, but I think that was probably because he thought Paul was meddling with it a little bit, because he had this thing about Paul meddling with his songs. However, going back to the Let It Be Naked release in 2003, the album came about when Apple contacted Alan Rouse and his team, who had been doing all the remixes and stuff for George and the Lennon estate as well. They've actually said they didn't want a remix of the original album, but to make it sound as how the band wanted it to sound at the time, as I said earlier. Alan Rouse, Paul Hicks and Guy Massey listened to all 30 reels of 1-inch 8-track tapes that had been recorded for the sessions. They set about trying to identify which takes were from which session, etc., and actually found that Phil Spector and Glyn Johns, who was the engineer at the time and who also done a rough mix of the album, had actually identified and done a lot of their legwork for them originally. And as it turns out, they actually did use quite a few of the Phil Spector takes from the tapes that they had identified. And because they had then been converted into a digital format, they were able to sort of take out bum notes, such as from the Rooftop sessions, and replace them from a similar sort of recording of the same song at that particular thing, just to make it sound much nicer, just to tidy things up. They were then able to obviously remove any extra sort of vocal, the overdubs, and the instrumental overdubs as well. And that's what makes this Let It Be Naked. It's basically a stripped down version of Let It Be. However, it's not a stripped down version of the original album. They have used alternate takes, and they have obviously tinkered with it as well. Going back to Let It Be Naked, we're going to take a look at the cover, which is this one here. And you may notice that the the photographs are in negative format, but 3 of them are the same pictures from the Let It Be album, the original album, and that's John, Paul, Ringo. George's picture is different, and here's the reason why. If you can see here, this is the original photo from Let It Be album cover, and this is it in a negative format. And as you can see here, George's picture doesn't really look that great in a negative image. So what they've then done is used John, Paul and Ringo's, but replaced George's with a different image. And that's the image we can see here. Want to see what that looks like in a positive format? So I did a little, just a little conversion online, and here it is here. So moving on to Let It Be Naked, we've already covered the front of it. On the back, we have the track listing here. Now the track listing isn't the same as the 1970 version. This is minus Dig It and Maggie May, but it does now include Don't Let Me Down, which wasn't on the original album. So we've lost 2 of the little tracks and we've gained another track on here. And as I said, these are stripped down versions, so there's none of the overdubs. Sadly, there's none of the chit chat at the front, you know, I Dig a Pygmy by Charles Hawtrey and the Deaf Aids and etc. etc. This is all just stripped back and it is just bare bones music, whereas obviously the album, the original album, has got all the chit chat, which, you know, we've come to know and love, or not love, depending on your point of view. Now, as I did mention, it is a gatefold sleeve, and you can see a great rooftop photo shot there, and it's got, you know, some writing on here. I've got a feeling, just basically handwritten lyrics from some of the tracks, as we can see here. We've seen the cover. This is the actual record now. I'm going to take it out of its polyline sleeve that it came in. And as you can see, it's not on an Apple label, although there is a small Apple on the label. But there's the film strip of the photos going across the middle, as well as obviously the track listing. As I said, it did come in a polylined, just a generic white sleeve. You also got a very nice big booklet, and this is what I like about records. CDs are all well and good, and I'll come on to the CD release of this in a minute or two. CDs are all well and good, but you know, you don't get a nice big book with a CD there. Inside we've just got, I'm going to sort of turn around here, you've got some photos there, plus some of the chit chat between the band members there, sort of transcribed out. Sure, we've seen these pictures lots of times before, but yeah, it's a nice thing. And on the back, we've got a really nice picture there. Fantastic. So yeah, we've got this really lovely deluxe sort of book to go with it. Moving on to the subject of this video, and as I said earlier, there is a 7-inch single that was only available 2003 when this album came out. It's this. It came with the album, was part of it, and when it's subsequently been reissued, this has not been available on record. So it's called Let It Be Naked, Fly on the Wall. And again, it's got the negative pictures there, the Beatles. And on the back, it's got a little track listing of some of the material that's on here. Now, if I take this out very carefully, we can see here. That's the 7-inch single there. And again, as I say, it's called A Fly on the Wall. Now this contains sort of snippets of songs, some of the snippets of conversation that we're missing from the album. I think they probably realise that people do enjoy hearing the you know, the to and fro in between the band members. So so they did include this 7-inch single with the original release of the album. So I will read out the track listing of what comes on the 7-inch single. As I say, they are little snippets, they're not complete songs. So you get things, Sun King, Don't Let Me Down, One After 909, Because I Know You Love Me So. You get Ringo's Don't Pass Me By, and also his fantastic Taking a Trip to Carolina, which, if you see the Get Back film, you can now see his full version of, or what he had of it at the time. You've got John's piano piece, Child of Nature, back in the USSR, Every Little Thing, Don't Let Me Down, All Things Must Pass, She Came In Through the Bathroom Window. You've got Paul's piano piece, Get Back, Two of Us, Maggie May, which as I said was missing off of the album, Fancy Me Chances, Can You Dig It, which is Dig It on the album, plus Get Back. A first pressing of this album is really hard to find. As I say, it has been reissued subsequently, but there are a few different slight variations, like the contrast in some of the pictures. Apparently, the sleeve itself is slightly sort of shorter and narrower. The paper on the booklet is sort of not as thick. Generally, it's all been trimmed down to make it a little bit cheaper. But the most important thing is you don't get that 7-inch single. So the only place you can get it is by finding an original 2003 issue of the album. I'm guessing there was only a few thousand copies made, because you've got to remember back in 2003, this was the sort of like the advent of sort of downloads, MP3 downloads. Streaming maybe hadn't quite come into it. I know when it was released, it was on iTunes. You could get it as part of their streaming, but that's since disappeared off of iTunes, and even you can't even now get the fly on the wall stuff on Apple Music or Spotify. Now, I did mention the CD earlier, and here's the CD, and to my knowledge, these still come with a fly on the wall documentary. So if you pick the CD up, you'll still get all that bonus material, just not on a 7-inch disc. So opening it up here, we can see there's disc 1, and it just flips open to disc 2 there, and it contains a smaller version of the booklet that I showed you. It's also got sort of copy protection on it. I don't know how good the copy protection is. I did read online, a few people did struggle actually even just playing it because of the copy protection, let alone copying from it. But yeah, there we are. That's the CD, which apparently is still available. I think the album is still available, and it was included in the Diagnosti, excuse the pronunciation, box set that came out a few years ago. So that's really about it for this video. As I say, the main thing to take away from the video is if you want the 7-inch single, you're going to have to find an original 2003 issue of Let It Be Naked. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.